All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to stop the yo-yo effect. I'm going to hang out for just a second here. I know we've got a few more people joining in with us. I definitely don't want to rush in. But one thing I want to say before we get started, for those of you who haven't heard me talk before, so my name is Charles Burroughs, and I'm the Fitness Services Coordinator over at University Recreation. One thing I like to do with these presentations is I love to get a lot of questions and interaction. So I encourage you to ask questions as much as you want. Feel free to put them in the chat or over in the Q&A section as well. And I'm more than happy to answer them. Just to kind of stay on task, what I'll do is if the question's not directly related to what I'm talking about, I'll save it for the end. I always like to leave a few minutes at the end to answer those questions. But if it's something pertaining to what we're talking about, I'll be more than happy to take a quick pause and answer whatever it is you got. All right, so I'm going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes as we got people piling in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so let's go ahead and get going. So like I said, I'm Charles Burroughs. I'm the Fitness Services Coordinator over with University Recreation. I've been working in fitness for about 8 years now. It's something that I love and that I'm passionate about. Not necessarily something I've always enjoyed. It really wasn't something that I got into until college. And so that was definitely a change in my life and a chance to get into fitness and understand, one, that I was capable of accomplishing it, but also understanding that really anyone is capable of making those changes. And so something that I'm really passionate about and believe in is making sure everyone knows what they're capable of when it comes to fitness and what they're able to achieve. I've worked here at the university for going on 4 years now. Before that, I worked at a commercial gym as a personal trainer and an instructor. Also spent a few years working in corporate wellness. And so I've had a lot of chances and opportunities to work in this fitness industry and see a lot of different sides of it. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of experiences to go along with that. And I think as a result, this topic in particular is something that means a lot to me because I feel like everyone in here, and especially I know myself, has dealt with this thing that we call the yo-yo effect of bouncing back and forth between, trying to reach our goals and then switching to another behavior, and just kind of a cycle of going back and forth. And one thing that I want to say before we get going, and I'll speak on it again, is that I don't want you to feel like that you've been a failure or that you've messed up because you've experienced this, because everyone who's tried to change a habit or behavior has probably experienced this back and forth effect that we call the yo-yo. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. And we're going to start first by clarifying what I mean when I say the yo-yo effect. What I mean is it's this vast alternating back and forth between one behavior and another. Originally, this was coined by a professor and actually a dean of, I think it was health studies at Duke. And basically he coined this term to describe going back and forth on a new eating plan or a diet. So in other words, maybe you're eating unhealthy before, you start a new eating plan or a diet, and then you fall off and go back and forth, right? You stick to it for a little bit, you get some results, maybe you last a couple weeks or a month, and then you go back and forth. But even though this was originally made to describe dieting, I feel it's equally relevant to fitness and really any time we're trying to start or create a new behavior. Um, so why does this happen? Why do we experience this back and forth, right? I mean, we might not experience something like this with a job or something else, but we seem to see this a lot when it comes to health and to fitness. For one reason, it's because this starting behavior that we have going on, this pre-existing thing, a lot of times it's something that's comfortable. It's something that we see that is stress relieving, even if that's temporary, and something that usually feels good. In fact, we even have this concept or this theory that's called the habit loop, which basically says that a lot of our behaviors or habits that we have are really based on three main components or three steps. The first step being some sort of cue, or another way of thinking this is like a trigger, for lack of a better word, something that sort of starts this habit or this routine that we do is usually triggered by something. So a really simple example of this might be, let's say that usually every day after work, you go home, you put your feet up and you watch TV. The cue for that might really just be clocking out at work or signing off, grabbing your keys, heading to the car. That might be your cue where you start that routine of, all right, I'm driving home, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm turning on the TV and I'm putting my feet up. You have that trigger or that thing that starts the habit. You have the action or the routine. And then also there's almost always a reward that goes with that. And that reward might not always be very obvious. It might not be something that you eat or money or some sort of trophy or something like that. But that reward oftentimes is simply a release of dopamine or of serotonin in our brain, something that makes us feel good and feel relaxed. Going back to that TV example, it might just be that once we sit down and we feel relaxed, our brain says, yes, this is good, this is right, and we get that little bit of serotonin release. We feel good about it. A lot of times we think that serotonin or dopamine, those feel-good chemicals in our brain, only happen with things like drugs or food or these big events in our life. But actually, our brain is constantly doing this, and it's almost a way of reinforcing a behavior or a habit. It's not always directly tied to a specific thing, but it does happen. And so this is really helpful in understanding when we're trying to overcome this yo-yo effect, because really what's happening is we're trying to change a habit or a behavior that's already instilled in us. And it might be that this habit or behavior has been instilled in us for not just months or years, but even decades. Sometimes it's been almost our entire life. And it's important to understand that, because then we understand that the task at hand when we're trying to change it can be challenging. However, if we've gotten to this point where we're trying to change this behavior, maybe it's unhealthy eating and we're trying to start a new eating plan. Maybe it's I've never worked out before and we're trying to start doing that now. If we're doing this, then we understand that whatever pre-existing condition there is, we've recognized it as being either unhealthy, as it having some sort of negative side effect. Maybe it doesn't affect our health, but maybe it's affecting other aspects of our life. Or we've recognized that this pre-existing behavior is hindering our goals. Maybe that's all it is, right? I would say that watching TV by itself isn't a bad thing, right? But if it is something that is keeping us from achieving a goal that is important to us, or that could be very valuable to us, then it is hindering our progress, and it's something that we want to change. So at this point, if we're experiencing the yo-yo effect, especially in regards to fitness or in health, then that means that we've recognized that that old behavior is something that is not desirable and that we want to change it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be an easy process, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be yo-yoing back and forth. We see this second behavior, this thing that we're trying to pick up, is something healthier or something that is in line with our goals. But like I said, that doesn't make it easy. If it was, we would all be successful and we'd all be healthy and happy and it'd be great. The truth of the matter is that a lot of times this new behavior, this thing that we're picking up, is really uncomfortable at first because we're trying to take something that is habitual and we're trying to replace it with something new. It's something new. It's something that a lot of times might be inconvenient. And probably the hardest part is that it is depriving us of that serotonin or that dopamine or that enjoyment, that comfort that we're getting from that previous behavior. And so we have this sense of deprivation when we're taking away something that we're used to and trying to start something new. In fact, a lot of this is actually based on a theory or a model that's already in place. In fact, this slide here looks totally different from the others, and it's because I took it straight from the American Council on Exercise's prep course that they give for personal training. And this theory or this model is called the health belief model. And basically what it is it predicts behavior in regards to health changes based on two ideas. One is it says that if someone is deciding to make some sort of health behavior change, that it's based on this perceived health threat. So let's say that the behavior that I want to change is smoking. Maybe I'm a smoker and I'm wanting to quit. That decision to change and whether or not it's going to be successful, one is going to be based on my perceived threat of that current behavior. And so with that perceived threat, there's really two parts to that. And that is one, perceived susceptibility. So if I currently smoke and I say that, okay, there's a potential negative health outcome, in this case, let's say perhaps cancer. The perceived susceptibility says, how likely am I to actually experience the negative outcomes resulted to that threat, right? If I don't think I'm susceptible at all, then there's very little chance that I'm going to perceive that threat as something really serious. And if I don't perceive it as something really serious, it's very unlikely that I'm going to change that behavior. Similarly, I might think I'm very susceptible, but perhaps I don't perceive the seriousness of that threat to really affect me. Maybe if it's something like watching TV, right? I might say that, well, the negative outcomes of that might just be that I'm missing out on something else. And I might be very susceptible, but if I don't think it's that serious to miss out on whatever it is I'm missing out, then I'm not going to perceive that as a big threat, and I'm not going to change. So basically, if I want to make a change, I've got to decide that that current behavior is a threat or some sort of threat to my health or to achieving something that I want. And then the second aspect of this model is this new behavior that we're going to start. And this new behavior, I've got to decide that one, it's going to be beneficial for me too, right? We just talked about that. And then I also have to perceive that the barriers that might exist for that new behavior aren't enough to keep me away. So if I'm going to start a new exercise program, or if I want to join a gym, some barriers to that might be the cost. It might be location if it's really far away, or it might just be the feeling of having to work out in front of other people. That can be terrifying. And so if those barriers are too much to overcome, then that in itself is going to keep me from that health behavior. And I don't want to dive too deeply into this or go on too far of a tangent, but the reason I'm bringing this up and pointing this out is one, a lot of people experience this and deal with this difficulty of trying to make a change. And as a result, dealing with this yo-yo effect of going back and forth saying, I make this decision, I'm going to try, and then we fail. It happens so much that we create models for it. We study it, not just health professionals, but also psychologists as well. This is something that is studied in depth. And so understand that this is a very real issue that a lot of people deal with. It is not just a few people, or it's not just you, but all of us have probably dealt with this one point or another. So if that's all that you take away from this, I hope you take away that. So what are the steps that we can help do to try to avoid this yo-yo effect, to try to stop it in place, or at very minimum, decrease the intensity of switching back and forth? So first off, it's important to understand that this new behavior is a priority. It must be a priority to be successful. That one can sometimes be hard to hear for some, but it's absolutely true. We have to make sure that fitness is becoming a priority for us. But I want to really stress the A there. It needs to be a priority, but it doesn't need to be the priority. In fact, usually what I see for people who experience this yo-yo effect, including myself, is that when it happens, a lot of times it's not that we didn't make it a high enough priority. But actually, for some of us, the problem is that it became too high of a priority. And when we do that, all of a sudden, it's no longer sustainable. And every time I talk about this, it reminds me of the first time I got into fitness myself. I remember I was in college and I was working at our freshman advising office. And my doctor told me I need to make some changes, start exercising. So I decided to do the P90X program. And for those of you who hadn't heard of that before, it was a program by Beachbody, and it was this 90-day super intense exercise and diet plan. It was all in one. It's crazy intense, and I actually don't recommend it for people just starting out. But anyways, so I decided to do it, and I suckered some of my coworkers into doing it with me. And we started out great. We're getting some results. I felt like I was getting stronger. I was losing a little bit of weight. And so as the two other people are doing it with me. It started out awesome. But what happened was it actually started to become a bit of an obsession. And that's kind of understandable, right? Because I was seeing success. I was so excited. And very quickly, we became those people where that was all we were talking about. And I'm sure my coworkers, the other ones, were groaning like, oh gosh, here he is talking about working out again, talking about his diet again. But it was just because I was so excited. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I made it my number one priority, to the point where I was focusing on it more than my grades, more than my work, more than anything else. And that was not sustainable, because eventually at some point, those other priorities, and really the ones that in hindsight mattered more, at some point, it had to be a point where I had to address those. And unfortunately, because I had tried to make fitness my number one priority, those things were starting to suffer. And when I had to finally address them, what basically happened was I fell off this priority and it dropped way down to the bottom of my list. I said this wasn't sustainable. And then I ended up falling off. And unfortunately, if we aren't able to find a healthy place to put fitness as a priority, then we have a very hard time juggling things. And what ends up happening is we either fall off our fitness program entirely, or we neglect those other things, and to a point it becomes a serious problem in our life. And then what really can start to happen then is that we start to associate fitness as this all-consuming, absorbing thing where we're not able to focus on anything else. And we start to think that if we want to be successful, we have to give it everything. And that's not true. And interestingly enough, this can start to become a barrier for us into doing anything new regarding fitness, as we start to say, oh, well, it's so time consuming. It requires so much effort and so much preparation. But the problem is with that is that really the issue is where we're putting it in our priorities. Fitness should not be something that you obsess about and think about constantly. It needs to be a priority, and it needs to be fairly high up there, but it doesn't need to be number one. If it is number one, then we've probably got some other issues we need to deal with. And so it's important that we find that level where it becomes enough a priority where we're able to choose it over things that are less important. Maybe in this case, watching TV is less important. So we put fitness higher than that. But it doesn't need to be more important than other things in our life that really we value more. And to illustrate this, I actually have an activity. If you've done this before, great. But I really recommend you do it again. If you've got a pen and paper, I really encourage you to do this now if possible, because our priorities do change on a regular basis. Right now, I'm engaged and I'm actually getting married next week. 3 years ago, that was not high on my priorities. That wasn't something I was thinking about, but now it is. And so when those priorities change, we need to reconsider them and try to really re-rank them. And so for this activity, what I'd like you to do is real quick, I want you to just jot down all your current priorities in life. This can be your relationships, your career, your education, your faith, whatever it is. I want you to write those things down. I also want you to write down your fitness or your health and add it in there as well. And then once you've gotten all these things down, and it might be 3 things, it might be 10, it might be 15, try to keep it semi-reasonable. You don't want 100 things down there. But write all these things down and then try to rank them, with number 1 being your utmost priority, and then working your way down from there. Some of these are very easy to do. You might be, obviously, this is number 1 for me, this is number 2. But then there are going to be some things that I imagine are probably a little tricky to do. And in those situations, what I like to do is I like to play the ultimatum game, where I say, okay, if I'm having to choose one at the expense of the other, which one is it going to be? If I have to choose between eating this slice of pizza or doing this workout, what is going to be most important for me right now? And then making that decision and say, okay, well then if this wins out, that's the next in line, this one follows, and so on and so forth. But the purpose of this activity, and step 3, by the way, is just to reflect on it and make adjustments if needed. And this can be an ongoing thing. There's really, you could do this as much as you want. You could do it once a week, once a month, once a year, but I really recommend doing this, because what it does is it allows us to, 1, reflect on our priorities and think about them. And it allows us to have something to resort to when we're faced with these obstacles and challenges, these decisions that require us to decide what our priorities are. If I get a sudden call after work, and normally that's when I work out, but then I have a close friend call me and say they need me, then I'm faced with that decision of, am I going to work out or am I going to go deal with that friend? Well, in this case, if I look at my priorities or I think about it, obviously this relationship, this friend, is more important than my fitness. And so I'm going to choose that friend every single time. But it's important to have that priority list in your head so that when you're faced with these decisions, you know what the right decision is. And not only that, but it allows you to know that it's okay to choose these other things over your fitness. We're going to talk a little bit more about urgency in just a second, but urgency does play a factor here as well. If my friend's in a dire situation and they need me, well, that's obviously going to be more important than a single workout. Even if maybe this isn't a very close friend, maybe normally my fitness is higher on my priority list for whatever reason, but the urgency of that situation tells me that I need to deal with that first. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a bit, but this activity is really important, and I really recommend you taking the time and doing this, because it helps you to really make these things tangible and to clearly set these things in your mind about what's most important. That's really helpful when it comes to sticking to this new behavior and avoiding that yo-yo effect of falling off. All right, so the next thing that we can do, and again, if you have any questions about any of these, feel free to drop them in the chat. I definitely don't mind taking a pause to answer. But the next thing that we can do is we need to develop urgency in regards to our goals. And I'm not saying we need to develop anxiety or develop more stress in our lives, not by any means. But really what I'm saying is that by developing urgency, we're really asking this question to ourselves in regards to our goal. And that is saying, what can I do now that moves me closer to what I'm trying to achieve? And you could replace the word now with next or today. But really what we're doing is we're saying, what can I do to get me there now? And it's important to stress that urgency or that immediacy, because a lot of times with our goals, there's something that takes a while or that's big, right? If my goal is to run a marathon and I've never ran before, or to lose 100 pounds, That is a big goal. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, these big goals, they do take a while. They can take a long time to reach that endpoint. And as a result of it being something that might take months or years, sometimes we can sort of stretch it out and take our time, and we lose that urgency or that immediacy in accomplishing these things. And so as a result, we just talked about priorities. If I have very low urgency on a priority, then when I'm faced with this or something else, it's very easy to push it back and push it to the side. So by developing that immediacy, I'm saying, okay, I need to do something now that's going to get me closer. And it does require some prioritization. We've already talked about that. But it also requires, to be urgent about it, it requires an active engagement in whatever we're doing. And I guess the best way to separate that active or passive is we could change this question up. If I was passive about it, I might just say, what is next in getting to my goal? Or just saying, what is next? And just leaving it at that. While an active approach is saying, what can I do? And the important difference there is it's saying that you have an active role in what is going on. If you're following a diet and it's not working, a passive approach might be, well, I hope it starts working soon, or I hope it gets fixed. But an active approach is saying, what can I do to fix it? That is a really, really important mindset to have when it comes to some sort of fitness goal, and really any goal in life, because these barriers, these things are going to happen. There is something that's going to slow you down. Something is not going to work, but we are going to find a way to fix it. And just, hey, I saw something pop in the chat. I wanted to check real quick. Okay, not a question. We're good. But the active approach is really important because it allows us to actively seek solutions and to figure out what the problem is and get around it. Because like I said, those setbacks are going to happen, but we need to figure out how to address it. So developing urgency is a really important part of this because it helps it maintain its priority level on our list so that we're able to continue to address it and to focus on it in an appropriate manner. All right. Something else that we can do to avoid this yo-yo effect is to celebrate the small successes in our progress. And in other words, that reward. Remember, I talked about that habit loop. That reward part is really important. If we want to establish a new and regular behavior, we need to have that reward system in place. And I'd mentioned that a lot of times it's just that dopamine or that serotonin release, and that's true. But sometimes earlier on, we may not have established that regular behavior yet. So we might have to find some sort of reward system that works for us. And we can't do that if we just hold that reward off to the very end. If we're just saying, well, I'm not going to be happy or satisfied until I've reached that 100 pounds or I've reached that 26-mile run without stopping. If we try to wait until that, then we're going to have a very hard time getting that habitual behavior set. We've got to start thinking on a smaller scale. And so every big accomplishment can really be broken down into incremental steps and incremental successes. A great example I think about this is getting your degree. I imagine just about everyone on here, since you work here at the university, has your bachelor's degree. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you have a master's, and some of you probably have a PhD. If you step back and look at the PhD, that is a huge accomplishment, right? And for those of you, maybe you already have your master's and you're like, well, I'm going to get a PhD. That undertaking might not seem as big, right? Maybe it's 4 years of work. Well, if you don't have your bachelor's degree yet, that doesn't look like 4 years of work. That looks like 8 or 9 years of work. If you're in high school and you haven't even finished high school yet, then you're looking at it like, well, that might be 10 or 15 years. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this, but realistically, we can't look at it in that big a picture alone. If it is very hard to stick with it. If you think back to your own schooling, You didn't say, wow, in elementary school, you didn't say, wow, if I want to get a master's degree, it's going to take me 15 years. That wasn't how you thought about it, right? You thought about it as like, well, I need to get through this class, or I need to get this diploma. And then once I get that diploma, then I'm focusing on school, and I'm going to focus on that first class. I need to get this project done, and then get this grade, and then move on to the next year. We've got to separate these things up and celebrate these successes, right? You may have said, well, I'm going to get a PhD someday, but that didn't mean you didn't celebrate your graduation from high school, right? You still celebrate when you got your bachelor's degree. It's important. We need to be able to reward ourselves when we see successes. And fitness is the exact same way. We need to celebrate and be happy when we get a little bit stronger, when we lose that 1 pound, when we perform a little bit better at whatever it is we're trying to perform at. We have to be able to celebrate those successes if we want to stick with it. A lot of times what I see with clients is that when they aren't successful, when they don't reach their goals and they fall off or they yo-yo, it's because they have a really hard time being able to celebrate those little successes and accepting those things as something that should be valued and that should be celebrated. And to go along with this, and this is slightly different, but it does have some similarities, is don't be afraid to have multiple measures of success. Going back to getting your degree, right? You could say that the diploma itself is a measure of success. You could say that the grades that you made along the way were a success. Maybe for you, success is getting that job offer afterwards. There are a lot of different ways we can look at it, but the more measures that we have, the easier it will be to celebrate it and to say, yes, I was successful. Maybe you wanted to run a certain distance in 3 months and you didn't get there. But you can ask yourself, well, what did I achieve? What other successes did I experience that got me there? Time and time again, the clients that I see are most successful, and this is even true with myself, the ones who are successful, the ones who are able to celebrate and recognize the things that they did accomplish along the way and understand that, oh, just because I didn't get this doesn't mean I didn't achieve something. And instead, these people who are successful are able to recognize what they did see, and they build upon that. They use that as motivation to continue forward. And one other thing you'll notice on there, this is a side note, but we really need to avoid what I call a completionist mindset when it comes to our goals. In other words, this idea that if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to follow this meal plan, if I'm going to do this workout, that I have to do it all perfectly or it's all in vain. This happens so much. It's funny because I feel like in a lot of other areas of life, we don't see this. But when it comes to fitness and especially dieting, it's this all or nothing mindset. I've got to eat all 3 meals of that day perfect to the letter, what I wanted to do, or it's all in vain, right? If you had this meal plan for lunch and then someone at the office brought in kolaches or donuts and you have that, and you're like, oh, well, my day's ruined. If I can't do it all perfect, I'm not going to do it. Day's gone, and you throw that day away. And then you're like, oh, well, I wanted to do this week perfect, but this day didn't work out, so I'm just going to take the week off. And then that week becomes a month, and then that month becomes a year. And then we end up on this yo-yo effect. A lot of the reason that yo-yo effect happens is because of this completionist idea where it's all or nothing. The people who are most successful in sticking with their fitness, they avoid this mentality. In other words, what they say is, oh, I messed up, fine. As soon as I'm able, I'm right back on track. You know what? I didn't have the breakfast I wanted. That's okay. Lunch, I'm going to get right back on track. That is a very important mentality to have. There's some urgency involved with that, but it's this idea that, you know what? I didn't have to do it perfect, but I'm going to do as much as I can. And the next thing that I do is going to be what needs to get done to get me back on track. It's going to get me closer to my goal. Even if I missed the first workout of the week, that's okay. I'm going to get the second, I'm going to get the third, and I'm going to go on from there. Avoid that completionist mindset. It can be hard to do, but it's a really important part. And that actually goes along really well with this last step, which is to find your reset button and to use it a lot. I already said before, but setbacks are bound to occur. They're going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when. You're going to have those days where you don't eat the way you wanted to. You're going to have those days where you didn't do the workout you wanted to, or you didn't get it done. There are going to be days where those other priorities that are higher on your list are going to take precedent, and you're going to have to miss out on your fitness or your health. It happens. That is a very normal part of this process. I've never met anyone who was able to successfully get through a whole program or achieve a certain goal without something happening along the way. And a lot of times, these setbacks are our own volition. We just gave into temptation. We just didn't feel like doing it that day. It happens. But when it happens, we need to, one, just accept that it happened. We need to say, okay, why did it happen? And then we move on. I included this picture of a goldfish because I remember it from the show. I don't know if anyone's seen the show Ted Lasso. He's the soccer coach, and he tells his players they need to have a memory of a goldfish. And really what that means is we don't need to dwell on our mistakes. We accept that it happens. We learn from it to maybe help us avoid that in the future, and then we move on. We cannot dwell on our failures constantly. We're going to have a very, very hard time moving forward. Sometimes this yo-yo effect simply happens because we make a small mess up, a small slip of our program, and rather than just moving on from it, we beat ourselves up over it. We say, why did I do that? Why did I fail? Clearly, I'm just going to fail at this. It's not working. And then we just fall off. A lot of times, this is the reason that happens. And so it's really important that you are able to find what I like to simply call your reset button. And that is a chance to say, you know what, I messed up. I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to move on. You have got to be able to do this. It can be challenging because I know a lot of us are hard on ourselves. We want to be able to do something right. We want to do it right the first time, but that doesn't always happen, especially when it comes to fitness, because it doesn't happen quickly. And sometimes it takes some trial and error to figure out what works. Our bodies are really complicated, but there are definitely some key processes, some key things that we can do that will work if we give it enough time. So again, find your reset button and don't be afraid to use that thing often, even if it has to be daily. One little slip or mess up, one little barrier is not going to ruin the program. It will only ruin it if you let it. And that comes from being too hard on yourself and not being able to hit that reset button. So really, it's just these four main things that are going to help us to stop this yo-yo effect. It's going to be making sure that we are prioritizing our fitness, that we find it at an appropriate level. Usually I recommend somewhere in that 4 to 6 range on that priority list. Somewhere in there is very reasonable, depending on what all you have in your life. It might be number 3 or something like that. But we've got to find a place where it's important to us. It needs to be something that we're thinking about it on a semi-regular basis, but it doesn't need to be all-consuming. We also need to develop urgency. We need to make sure that we're thinking about what we can do next, what we can do now to achieve that goal. We need to be able to celebrate small successes, and with that, recognize successes that might not be directly related to our end goal. I love it when I have clients who they came in and their goal was very much focused on weight or appearance, but they start to develop this excitement and this passion for seeing performance-related goals happen. They're excited when they're able to do that first push-up, or they're excited when they can do this amount of weight or do this thing correctly. It's really exciting when I get to see clients experience that, because I know that they're starting to get a bigger picture of what fitness is and what success is. Our bodies can be really fickle, especially when it comes to things like weight loss and gaining muscle. Sometimes, for whatever reason, from a day-to-day basis, the scale might change 5 pounds in the wrong direction. It doesn't make sense. But what's important to understand is that if we recognize these other successes, we're still going to help get to our end goal, because we're building on that. We're creating momentum. And momentum is a really big part of this, of building these new habits, whatever it is. And then lastly, we're able to find that reset button. We're able to say, okay, I messed up, I hit a barrier, and I'm going to move on and get past that. You've got to be able to forgive yourself. Okay, so I wanted to leave some time for questions. So I'm gonna take a moment here and just relax, answer any questions that you guys have. I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter today so we have that time to answer questions. A lot of times I get some really good stuff about whether it's goals or yo-yo effect. So I want to make sure I have time for that. All right, let's see. I got a question. I'm going to read it here first. All right. So someone here says, I've lost a good bit of weight and have kept over half of it off. My eating habit started with low carbs, but over time I've taken carb intake, reading. So he asks, any tips on addressing this habit of eating differently, like unhealthy foods, foods on the weekend, which causes me to yo-yo a bit? Okay, so that's a really good question, and it is pretty specific. So I think my understanding is you eat pretty healthy during the week, but then on the weekends, that's when you sort of take a break, and it causes you to yo-yo a bit. So my first recommendation here is really going back to that completionist or all or nothing mindset. Usually what I recommend for clients that I'm working with is to avoid cheat weekends or even cheat days. And my logic here is it's going back to that completionist idea of the day is either got to be all great or it's all horrible. What I've found for clients who are most successful is cheat meals is the best way to go. In other words, if I'm going to eat poorly this weekend, I'm going to try to keep it to just a few different meals. I'm going to spread those out because it allows us to still experience those good foods that we love, right? But it also keeps the whole day from going kaput. It keeps us from building a negative momentum. So my recommendation was, say, if I'm going to eat unhealthy this weekend, I'm going to plan 3 meals that I'm going to eat unhealthy. And then the other ones, I'm going to try to stick with what I was doing during the week. I'm going to try to still eat healthy for those other meals. If it ends up being 4 meals that were bad or 5, that's okay. But I'm still going in with the goal of splitting those up and still maintaining my healthy eating throughout the weekend. I find personally that that's really helpful in sticking with those goals because it avoids that negative momentum. It avoids a really excessive caloric intake that might cause us to gain a little bit more water weight or just a tiny bit of fat. More than likely, 3 days of unhealthy eating is not going to cause you to gain a lot of weight. But what's usually happens, or what's worse, is we just get that negative momentum where we kind of fall off a bit, and that starts a chain reaction of a full-on yo-yo where we just completely relapse in the other direction. So I'd recommend is to try to spread it out and just pick 2, 3, 4 meals over that weekend rather than just having a total break from what you're doing. And also I find that that also helps to develop a more of a moderation mindset where we're saying, okay, these unhealthy foods are okay in moderation rather than just going all or nothing. In my opinion, what I'm seeing from this question is that kind of completionist mindset where I'm going to be real good here and then I'm just going to completely be bad here. Try to avoid that. Try to find a healthy medium so it's not that all or nothing idea. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions that we got? More than happy to hang out here. Any other fitness questions? It can be specific to yo-yoing. It could be specific to programming, anything like that. More than happy to sit here and wait. Real quickly, if you're thinking of questions or anything like that, just want to give a quick shout out to the Rec Center. We do have personal training here. A lot of times, sometimes that's the thing you need to get kick-started and on a program. Personally, I found that having a trainer is very helpful in avoiding the yo-yo effect. because it's someone to help hold you accountable and to keep you focused and on track. Definitely not needed to be successful by any means, but for some people, it's really helpful. Having a professional who knows where the pitfalls are that can cause us to fall off, that can be a game changer for a lot of us. So that's something that we offer at the Rec Center. We've definitely got group exercise classes that are a lot of fun. And it's nice to have an environment that helps to motivate you and helps you to keep you on track. Sometimes it's just needing that extra sense of accountability to help us stay focused on our goals. I'm going to keep hanging out here. I don't have anything else to cover as far as this presentation, but if you want to stick around and listen to any other questions or anything like that, definitely encourage you to stick around for that. But I'm just going to hang out here and see if we got any more questions. Oh, also, I definitely encourage you to go back. You can go to the Wellbama website and see some of the past webinars we've done in the past. I've done 4 or 5 webinars on fitness mythbusters. We've got some really good content in some of those videos. Got a lot of great participation and questions about different fitness myths that exist. Definitely encourage you to go check those out and some of the other presentations that they've done. Just a lot of really good stuff on really all things health and wellness, not just fitness. There's been some good ones on sleep and I think even financial wellness. A lot of great presentations. One person asked, will this one be listed online as well? Yes, it will. I'm going to send this PowerPoint over to Ashley Bowman, and then also, if I understand it correctly, they'll upload this online as well. So, yes. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions today. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you all have a great weekend. Just so you know, I am always available through email or phone if you ever have any fitness related questions. I want to try to be a resource for people to answer any questions they have and try to help them be successful with whatever their goals are. So feel free to reach out to me either through email. My email is cburroughs@ua.edu. Or my extension is just 86261. Feel free to give me a call or an email. It doesn't have to be about personal training. You don't have to have a membership at the Rec to talk to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. So have a wonderful weekend and hope you tune in next time. Have a great day.